Welcome to Mr. Marr History. In today's video we are looking at the National 5 History exam and considering how to answer Evaluate the Usefulness questions. Let's look at some background information. These questions will be worth 5 marks. Evaluate the Usefulness questions can appear in any section of the final exam and you'll get 2 overall. One of these will be based on a primary source and one will be based on a secondary source. The purpose of these questions is to read the source and then consider the ways that it would or perhaps wouldn't be helpful and useful if you were researching a particular topic. Let's look at how you can get marks for this question. As has been noted, they're worth 5 marks. However, there are up to 6 different approaches you can use to get marks. You can talk about the type of source for a mark. You can talk about who made it for 1 mark. You can discuss when it was made for a mark. And you can look at why it was made for a mark. You can also talk about information the source tells us and get up to 2 marks for this. And you can talk about information which is missing from the source and again get up to 2 marks. In total there's 8 potential marks up for grabs, but you can only get a maximum of 5 overall. In terms of each issue, this is one way to approach them. When discussing the type of source, it's not enough simply to say that it's a diary or a letter, for example. You have to explain why this would make it more or perhaps less useful. In terms of who made it, again you can't simply say the identity of the person. You have to explain why this is useful and important. Perhaps, are they an expert on an issue? Do they have a particular insight or experience? You can talk about when it was made, again considering why this date may be relevant. Is it perhaps closer to the time when the events were occurring? Is it later on when a historian's had time to research the matter? And so on. You can talk about why it was made. Why do you think the source was made and why this could then be more or less useful? In terms of what the source tells us, you should look at quotes and consider their accuracy, and before linking this back to the question and explaining their usefulness. You can do this up to twice. And finally, you should think what you know about the topic that isn't actually mentioned in the question. If you know anything for this, then you can get up to 2 marks for identifying these issues. In terms of answering the question, this is a good approach. You should always state the particular fact from the source, and then, in a separate sentence, you should explain that this is or is not useful because. For example, the source was made in 1807, this is useful because, and you would link this back to the particular question you're discussing. In terms of quoting from sources, this is a good approach. You have to explain exactly why the quote is relevant to the question. It's also important that you state that the source is not only useful, but also accurate. For instance, you would say source A says, and give the quote, and in a separate sentence say this is useful because it accurately shows that, and you would explain the relevance to the question. Let's look at an example question, which is drawn from the era of the Great War topic. This examines the impact that the Great War had on women's suffrage. As you can see, the source identifies a number of facts, such as the author, the type of source, and also when it was published, as well as, of course, the information. We begin by discussing what the source tells us. So we look at the quote, and then we link this back to the question, saying not only is it useful, but we say it's accurate, and we explain why this is relevant. We can do this up to twice. Here you can see the particular quote that we've identified. And here you can see the link to the word accurate, gaining us the mark. This also particularly explains why the information is useful based on the overall question. Having done this, we then consider what else we know about the topic that's not mentioned. Again, we can do this twice. Again, you can see a direct link back to the specific question. At this point, we then consider the identity of the person that made the source. We look at who it is, and we consider what insight they would have to the particular topic. We consider when the source was made. We consider if this is more or less useful, and again we link this back to the exact topic. Finally, we look at the type of source. Again, we link this back to why this would perhaps be useful and insightful. Let's look at the answer in overall summary. We begin by talking about information that the source tells us. We can do this up to twice to get 2 marks. We then talk about information which is missing. Again, we can get up to 2 marks for doing this. We can also look at who made it. Again, we have to explain the relevance to the question. If we had given 2 facts from the source and 2 facts that are missing, then along with this final discussion of who made it, that would be 5 marks. However, if we still have to get more marks, we may want to go on to discuss when the source was made, or finally potentially the type of source. We can also discuss the reason that the source was made as well. National 5 History Exam, how to answer Evaluate the Usefulness questions. It's really that simple.